Hey, you guys, hope you're well. I just wanted to take this opportunity and let you know about our amazing new business scalability scorecard. So have you ever wondered if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, and you want to grow and scale the business, but not sure how, and you're looking for some advice and you're looking for some strategies about how you could effectively grow and scale your business? Well, this is your opportunity. We have actually created an amazing business scalability scorecard. It'll take you around 7 to 8 minutes. And at the end of that, it will actually create a report of all of the things that you're doing particularly well in and the things that you need to make improvements to your business. And it's a great tool and a great asset for your business. To get free access to that, go to bit.ly/business-scalability-scorecard. Go there, go now. Take care, see you soon.
This is the Game Changers Experience. Deep dive conversations with leading business disruptors, Olympic athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and influencers from around the world. This show will teach you insights about the winning principles in mindset, productivity, marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, business strategy, and more. Hosted by Productivity Authority, business strategist, former elite athlete, author, and public speaker, Adam Strong.
I am going to introduce our next guest. And what's really fascinating about this is that I met this chap on Clubhouse, one of my favorite places of hanging out with some cool individuals. And what I love about this particular individual is his energy. But I'm also fascinated about I'm going to call it his obsession more than anything else, which is all around human psychology, right? Alignment, but also entwining that into a bit of marketing and health and wellness, which is really, really interesting. He's from Vancouver, Canada, and he calls himself an entrepreneurial architect, which I absolutely love. He's obsessed with creating new ideas, developing team building. Without further ado, put your hands together for Mr. Julian Deschutter!
What's is going on, man? That is a beautiful introduction. I'm so grateful for it.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Feel honored to get the ask to show up. So I'm happy.
Happy Wednesday, as they would say on the Game Changer show.
Yeah, I'm a little bit farther behind you, so I still have a whole day ahead of me.
It's all good. So listen, what I was going to say to you, I'm kind of interesting to know, actually, because I know that, you're in Vancouver. You're an interesting person. You're an interesting character because you have these obsessions around human psychology and health and wellness and staying fit. I mean, if you look at your Instagram, it's actually really fascinating. But tell us some more about, like, what do you do right now? And I'm all about creating impact, Julian, right? And it's the same for you. I'd love to know, more about your background story and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so it's such life is such an interesting experience, and I've always battled between, this brain that is since I can remember has been this overthinker, and then this kind of inside that is a builder. And I think naturally, without me realizing it, that was always going to lead me to some form of entrepreneurship, whether that was in a company, out of a company, I didn't really know. But when I go back, it was like tree forts and Lego and building things. And, in high school, it was organizing trips for my friends, and just always that natural inclination to create experiences and spaces that I wanted to see. And then I was going to university and doing kind of the whole role in business and finance where, they're slowly trying to put you into these positions. What about this? And so ultimately all roads, when I kind of look back, have been pointing toward entrepreneurship. But it's never been entrepreneurship in the space of, I would say, like business and corporate business. It's always entrepreneurship from taking resources and things and reorganizing them to create things that ultimately make my life better, people around me's lives better. And just always coming back to the question of like, what's the landscape right now, and how do we make that, better or more enjoyable or more fulfilling or healthier or thriving or whatever that kind of outcome is. And as I've kind of grown older and become more aware of my very finite role as a human being, realizing that I'm just one chain in an extremely long link of chains, and that my job isn't to conquer all of this, but to rather play a very humbling role in getting the baton passed to me, and then at some point passing it off to some other person, and more of being a conduit for that rather than, the archetype of an entrepreneur that I grew up with which was much more of what I would say like a conqueror, where it's like the person at the top and you're, controlling and stuff like that. So it's been a fascinating entrepreneurial journey, from a kid building massive Lego castles and tree forts to building companies, but also one that is very steeped in the road of self-awareness and the road of consciousness. And so it's been really, just fascinating and fun.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Did you, I was going to say to you actually, Julian, did you, like when you had this realization, okay, where you thought to yourself, okay, so I feel like I need to become an entrepreneur, to kind of, I suppose, accept that actually you're going to take a different path. And then what were the what were people around you, like your family, your spouse, saying, and whatever it is, because the traditional routes to market, right, is that we go to school, go to college, go to university, get a good job, right, and live the life of Riley, whatever that fucking looks like. But I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so that was actually a really kind of powerful story. And the one kind of caveat that I'll always say is that I'm not one of those people that I think everyone should be entrepreneurs. There's kind of those people that fly the flag that, kind of go, everyone should have freedom. Like my personal stance is that everyone should take a long time thinking about who they are and what they seek in their life, and then finding the place that gives them that and find peace in that, right? So naturally, I'm a type of person, I don't like operations. I don't like repetition. I don't like feeling like I have to go to the same place every time. And I'm extremely okay with lots of risk and having no income, right? So by definition, the traits that I feel safe in push me towards being an entrepreneur. But I have friends that, they like security and they like to know that if they do X, Y, and Z, the outcome will be something. And so I always just like to make that distinction, because I think there's this glorification of entrepreneurship that we have right now. And rightfully so, because a lot of, JOBs have been oppressive by nature. But in reality, like I think of some of my employees and I love them to death and I just want to support the hell out of them in those positions. And I think about like giving them the security they need to have their families and stuff like that. And I go, that's a beautiful dynamic. But for me, I think really there was a couple things that happened. The first one would have been when I was about 17, was I experienced through some family friends what it was like to have, what I'll call God money, which is more money than you can spend, and it was not in an outrageous, like over the top way. It was just this level of scarcity that didn't exist. And for the first time in my life, it was kind of like, hey, where do you want to go for lunch? And it's like, anywhere we want, or hey, I want to bring my mom here. And it's like, well, book a ticket, bring her over. And it made me realize that like, I grew up from like a pretty humble middle-class family. And you realize that like, there is a world out there that exists where all the things that were so routine to me didn't exist. And what that really did was it just moved me from like the mindset that I had only known because of where I was growing up to, hey, here's this huge world and I don't even know what the extent of it is. And so that kind of primed me to realize that like, if I go after that, there's opportunity there, but then also, that alone doesn't solve the happiness fulfillment equation.
Right.
And the second part to that was when I was in university, I was, going through school, and I took a course on how to become a bartender. And it was a 2-week course, and the course, it was all right. It wasn't run that well. And on like the second last day, the lady that was teaching it was talking about how the owners were trying to sell it. And here I was, this, astute 19-year-old kid going to business school. And I just said, hell, maybe, I should buy it. And that idea kind of for the next few days just got stickier and stickier in my mind. And so lo and behold, I called them up. I asked them how much it was. It was, mid 5-figure mark. And I went to my parents and I said, hey, Mom, can I borrow that much money? And the first thing my parents said is, what are you going to do with it? And I explained them what it was. And they ended up mortgaging their house, giving their 19-year-old son that amount of money, building, essentially financing it, and enabling me to buy it. And I didn't realize at the time, how dumb that might have been on their part, but also how empowering that was from a parent-child relationship to go to, your maternal and paternal figure, and them to turn around and go, yeah, chase your dreams, and that I think about it now in hindsight, and I'm like, what would them saying no have done to my permission structure? And realizing that, like, I go back to being like 7 years old, and there's moments like that, and realizing that I've grown up in this world where my parents have, in a healthy way, checked in, but in a much more healthy way, enabled me to make my own mistakes. And so I ended up buying that company, having it for a year, over 3xing revenue, cleaning up some of the operations. And there was no strategy. It was just stupid, simple things like go hang posters on bus stops and all this type of stuff. And I ended up selling it. And
what was the company? What was the company?
It was called Fine Art Bartending School.
Cool.
And so it was just a little bartending school that taught people how to bartend and turn kind of, skills into a side job that paid pretty well. And so here I, was running a bartending school without ever having bartended, without really knowing how to bartend. And I ended up selling it 11 months later, doing over 200% on the revenue, or on my initial investment. And at that time was 20 years old, sitting with, a modest chunk of cash, but a lot of cash for a 20-year-old. Meanwhile, right. I was going through school, and all of my teachers were just talking about how, lucky I would be to have this job that pays $60,000 or $70,000 a year. And, and that was the moment that it pierced the veil for me. And I realized that while, like, yes, that's one reality, there are other realities around there. And not that their reality wasn't true, but it wasn't the most true. And I and started to look for, like, all of the other opportunities, and started to really understand that, society has all of these rules, but in actuality, they're pretty loose. Like, there's some rules obviously you can't break, death, taxes, some crimes. But for the most part, all of the, social constructs that we've created are just, speed bumps. And that if you kind of look at them differently, you can play around and reorganize. And really, with the internet, it completely changes that whole thing. And so that just got me really obsessed with not really listening to what people say, but really watching what people do. And you start to realize that there is opportunity everywhere, and there's problems everywhere, and that, somebody with an inquisitive and curious mind, this is just a heyday. It's an overwhelming heyday because there's so many opportunities to create and put together, and to meet people and put it together. So yeah, I really, really credit that 1.5 year window when I was 19 that really took me from, wanting to be a builder. I was actually originally in school for engineering because,
right.
bridges and planes, and to an entrepreneur. And, in hindsight, financially, that was a much better decision. but also I think from a building standpoint, it's been much more fulfilling to be able to just create out of this space of what really feels like greenfield opportunity.
I was going to ask you, because you mentioned about the fact that you was in school and stuff. Did you ever feel like you'd get kind of, do you ever feel like you're the black sheep of the class? Like, I suppose everyone that goes to college or school, right, they go because they want to go and get a good job, right? But then there's you, kind of, you're the builder. You're 19, you're doing business, and then you exit at 20, right? So you've got more money in your bank account than most of these guys would have if they had earned like sort of 20, 30 years of salary. Did you ever feel like you were this kind of black sheep in the classroom? And I don't know, did it kind of make you feel uncomfortable in any way?
Yeah, I think that's one thing, that I'm really grateful for. And so much of, going through this has been, understood in hindsight, not really at the time. I think a lot of the time I was going through school. So like I had an opportunity at 20 to drop out. And I chose not to. And still to this day, I'm grateful I did. And it's one of those things where it's like, I always knew that I was probably never going to use my my degree. I was lucky. I got pretty good grades in school, like pretty high GPA in that sense. So I didn't feel like I was out of like the norm societally. Like I still got along, I still fit in, I still got a lot of good grades, but I definitely felt like I was playing a part.
Right.
But B, also that the structure that was built for me didn't work, right? Like I think in my last year, I ended up, skipping 50+% of my classes, and
Right.
still maintaining, really good grades. And what it was for me is like, we had this thing called YouTube, and we had, access to mentors and teachers online. And if you could teach me a course in a week and I fundamentally understood it, then why should I have to go to class? Right. And that was one of those rules where it's like, we force people to go to class when really the only thing that should matter academically is an understanding of the material and arguably the relationships you make in class. But if you can understand the material and make those relationships out of class, what role does class play in that? And I'm not advocating everybody skips classes, but I'm advocating that we question why we do the things we do and figure out ways that are very much outcome oriented, to get you there faster. Like you can retire with $1 million in your bank account if you invest in your 401k and you make your salary and you do that and you follow the mathematical rules, you'll get there. But you can also retire with $1 million in your bank account if you build something of value, work on it really hard for a year, and then sell it right away. And you both have the same outcome, but one has a much better experience of life potentially. And so that's actually what really got me into human psychology, was just this inner gut feeling of like, it feels like everybody's playing this dumb game. Like everybody's posturing and saying these rules and doing these things. And I'm like, but it's
That's
dumb
ego,
because it's smart.
That's ego.
Yeah. Well, that led me to psychology, which then led me to consciousness, which then led, you go down the rabbit hole. But I was really fascinated with why we set up these structures when there's better ways to do that. And keep in mind, I went through a very transformative period of my life from like 16 to 23 in a very transformative period of analog to digital. Right. So 2010, my teachers are talking about, or 2008, my teachers are talking about, getting an opportunity to meet with this person is the privilege of a lifetime. And here I go on LinkedIn and I'm messaging the CEO of every single Fortune 500 company I can, which at the time, some of them would talk to you. And it was one of those moments for me that really tapped into a little bit of a rebellious side, but not rebellion from anarchy, more rebellion from let's just do the best good and create the most good for people.
Interesting, really, really interesting. And I know that you mentioned actually about happiness, right? Really,
yeah.
And I know that you kind of decided to choose a route which was very unconventional to conventional schooling, right? And the belief system that we're programmed to think about what we do because our parents used to do it and all that shit. But question for especially for listeners that are listening in, right? How do you, from your perspective, right? So you've got people and you've probably got friends, I've got friends, right, that are in jobs that they fucking hate, but they do it because they feel like they need to keep up with the Joneses, right? And they sacrifice happiness and purposeful lives over this kind of belief system that they're not going to keep up with the Joneses. What advice do you have for people like that?
Yeah, that's always such a crazy experience to like watch unfold. And humans respond to incentives, and we respond to incentives we don't even know we have, right? Like, your mother or father might have bought you a cake because you got an A+ in grade 2 on a test that was about coloring with crayons. And that moment of feeling good and that relationship that you've built with your mother has now basically built a nervous system inside of you that wants to color inside the lines over and over and over again for the rest of your life. And you don't know why you want to color in the lines. You don't even realize you are coloring in the lines, but you have a biochemical reward for doing that because, your mother did something when you were in grade 2. And so I always kind of start, with an understanding of why humans are doing what they're doing and separating, the animalistic human from the soul human, right? So the biochemical dependency that wants security, food, and safety versus your soul, which wants to create and express and expand, right? And you can call those whatever you want, but they're generally two distinct pieces inside of somebody. And so whenever I'm like dealing with or working with somebody like that, the first thing is to like map out what they're doing and why they're doing it, right? Because most humans go, I want happiness and I want fulfillment. But what they don't realize is that the system they're currently constructed and architected is robbing them of both. But there's some sort of narrative in their head that's telling them, but if I can just get there, I'll be happy or I'll be fulfilled or right. And so once you lay out how those things are actually going, and I'll actually like mind map it out for myself and for somebody, just to get them to see the pattern. Because it's really hard to make a change until you see the pattern. And I think there's a big space of intuition for an individual there of like, not necessarily getting to the answer, but like sitting with yourself. And if you're doing shit you don't want to do every day, you owe it to yourself, to the people you're around, to your kids, to your partner, to, in a more esoteric way, the world, to not necessarily blow up your life and make a change, but to spend an hour once a week starting to map out how you get out of that place. And if you can start to map that out, all of a sudden you have a little thing where you're like, okay, I'm going into work and my throat's tightening. That's a pretty good indicator you're doing something you don't want to do. And if your throat's tightening all day, every day, cool. You owe it to your own self to get out of there. And a lot of the times I think we just like throw the ball, and we're just like, blow up your life, become an entrepreneur, when that's a huge drastic change. When in reality, for most people that, crave that security in the first place, it's like, maybe just find a job that's more in alignment, or maybe, shadow somebody who is building a side hustle that's profitable and learn how they're doing it, or, start with those incremental things to first realize that there is another way of experiencing life. And it doesn't have to be like that. And that the more you expose yourself to those different things, the more you realize you can, create almost whatever reality you want, and let's not forget, there's a 7-year-old kid on YouTube making $25 million a year talking about toys, and it's that reality where it's like, the world is so forgiving now in taking passions and turning them into revenue in a way that's never been possible before. And maybe it might not replace your entire job in the beginning, but it'll, give you a little bit of space to breathe. And so I'm really passionate about, helping people find that alignment, whatever that alignment is. I will never say that it should be what I want, but then also being very compassionate to why people ended up there in the first place.
Right.
Because I think it's so easy to be on the outside of that and volley in of like, everyone should have freedom and everyone should be an entrepreneur. But that doesn't really understand the complexities of the human experience and how, we're wired to fit in. First and foremost, we want to fit in because fitting in equals survival. And so if the whole world is telling you to get a job, you're actually biologically dumb not to, right? Like you're isolating yourself. And it's only been in the last 8-9 years when entrepreneurship has become cool that it's societally acceptable to be an entrepreneur. But, go back to the 2000s and it's like, you're an outcast. So I always just like bring those components in.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I absolutely 100% agree with what you're saying. And, and I know that we also have, I know that you're also you're a big fan of a good friend of mine, Dr. John Demartini, which you're kind of fascinated by his work. And I know that, what is your epiphanies and experiences with John?
Yeah, I think, I don't even know where to begin with Dr. Martini. He and for anyone that's not familiar with him, I highly recommend, you get into some of his books, and not just him, go into all of the great thinkers that have shaped society, learn about Carl Jung and what he was talking about with archetypes, and go read Viktor Frankl and understand what he's talking about with purpose. And because the human brain is designed in one reality, and we often forget that like all of our perceptions have been shaped by the reality in which we have evolved in, right? So the only reason we can hear is because we evolved in a place with sound. If we had evolved and this is a bit weird, but if we evolved in space, we wouldn't need ears, but we might have some other receptor that picks up input from the outside. And that our input is a very narrow band of the reality of existence. And so, guys like Dr. Martini are just so good because you think life is this.
Yep.
And you read what they're saying, and as you digest it, you realize that life is this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and it just gets so much bigger. And at one point, I just kind of hit this emotional, I don't want to call it a breaking point, but it was more or less a breaking point where you just realize that like I'm this very finite being flying on a rock in a very small sliver of time as one human in a chain of what so far has been 110 billion humans. And I'm worried about all of these tiny little trivial things. And what a lot of his work had helped me do is realize like the dynamic of myself and the ego, and really help me position to myself to a place of coming back to joy over and over and over again, even in the roller coaster that is the human experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, it's interesting. I mean, by the way, guys, if you don't know who Dr. John Demartini is, you can go check him out on our podcast, The Game Changers Experience. He is the number one world's leading expert on human behavior. honestly, the guy's got so much knowledge. He's actually read 299 of the ologies, by the way, the ologies. That's like psychology, physiology, all of those kind of stuff. And, it's such a fascinating conversation. And he's so intellectual and such a great giving person. I love in fact, I think what we're planning on doing, by the way, Julian, is we're our main conversations with his team to be able to do a club room with him. And so I'll keep you informed of the progress on that. But yeah, he's a pretty busy guy though.
Oh man, he's one of those guys that'll just in the most beautiful way break your understanding of what you think reality is. Which gives you so much more flexibility and freedom to just be a human. Right. And I deeply believe that so many of us are just, trying to experience humanity and be a humanity, playing a very human societal game that we've created that is less and less feeling human, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of every few years, Julian, I go through a massive shift, right? So let me explain, right? So before I go through this massive shift, I go into this time of, and I should do it more often really, but then I'd have too many shifts, is reflection, right? Self-reflection. I think it's so important to have reflection. What do you do? How important is reflection in your life and how do you practice it?
Yeah. It's been a really beautiful process because I've had a couple of like really pivotal moments. And the first thing, when I was about 18, I used to have this little journal that I would keep. And on the one side would just say head decision and the other side would say heart decision. And
right.
And then it'd have like a little note section about which decision I took and how it turned out. And almost overwhelmingly, I was more aligned and felt better when I took the advice of intuition. And that doesn't mean financially better off. That doesn't mean, better off circumstantially in life. It just meant I felt better. And I felt more at home in my skin. And so going through that process was a moment that like really allowed me to like lean into intuition. Which inevitably over kind of a time period pushed me to start to create, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, just as a check-in, and to sit there and just be like, what's going on in my life? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And, I go through a little bit more formal experiences every kind of 3 to 4 months, generally once a quarter, where, I do the things, the checklist of like, checking money. Does money make sense? Does time make sense? Does goals make sense? But much more powerful than that is just like a 15-minute, very still check-in every day where I just, take stock of what I'm doing. And sometimes, to be honest, it's 5 minutes. Sometimes it's 3 minutes. But going back to this thing of like trying not to bullshit myself out of a life that I want. Right. And if I want to be free and travel, then, getting to that place where at the very least I'm honest with myself about it of like, this is what I want, but this is what I'm doing. Am I okay with that? If yes, keep going. If no, start progressing towards change. And so, without telling people just to like meditate, I think that process of checking in quietly every day matters. And then I'm also a big fan of stillness through meditation, just to create more and more space to allow those little voices to come up and to be present. And I find in a world that is so loud and so overstimulating, that is a practice that ultimately does need to be cultivated. We have brains that are running 100 miles an hour all day, every day, texts, incoming, emails, thinking. And then, you sit down to go meditate and it'd be like grabbing Usain Bolt and stopping him at the 50-meter line and saying, stop. Like every instinct in his body is like, why would I stop? Keep running. Right. And then, so we meditate for 10 minutes and we're like, my brain won't stop. Meditation doesn't work. And it's like, of course it doesn't. You've been training it to go at 100 miles an hour 99% of your time. You have to basically rewire it to learn to slow down. And so a lot of the times I think we default to like, meditation as a really cool tool for self-awareness, when in reality, it doesn't work in context. So I just tell people, and myself included, to just sit down and, listen to music and just let things come up and find that place where you listen to your insides of like, what feels right, what feels intuitive. And ultimately somehow to find the courage to honor that on some level. Yeah. Right.
Interesting.
Because I think a lot of us know what's right for us, but the courage is a whole nother component,
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So interestingly enough, I was going to say, because I know that you are working on some great stuff right now, and you've had some. I mean, you're the co-founder of various kind of startup companies, and you're in the tech space and that kind of stuff. What are you working on right now? I'd love to know what you're working on right now.
Yeah, so the two big projects that I have right now are a platform called Movement App, and that is a fitness platform that was born out of COVID, just gyms transitioning online. But what it is really kind of merged into is understanding how do you get people healthy, right? And we live in a world of short-term gimmicks and diets and all this stuff, when in reality, biology is so much more complex than that. And so on the surface, it is like online fitness classes and a bunch of psychology around that to get people to show up every day. But really the long-term mission behind it is to crack the psychological code on how do you incentivize people to maintain their body in a way that keeps them healthy and happy. And I think we have forgotten how much, I don't think we've ever been taught how much our body does unknowingly. There's millions of biochemical processes that happen around the clock, 24 hours a day with very few input from us. And you only realize that they're not happening when they stop, in which case that's when illness and disease starts to creep up. And so I'm just really passionate about helping people either maintain the health they already have, which is priority one, because that's the easiest, but then also helping people get back to a place. And if you look around at biology in healthy environments, jungles, etc., where it has the right amount of inputs, biology is designed to thrive. If biology is not thriving, it means that some sort of input, some sort of environment is out of balance. And so you just kind of look at, what we've created in our modern society, and then you look at, increasing rates of obesity and increasing rates of mental health issues. And, they're extremely complex situations, but the fundamental truth that I kind of pull out of there is something is not balanced in the human ecosystem. And so Movement exists to help in a small way act as a platform to allow people to, at the very least, do some big things that take a majority of the space up, in the sense of, you go for a good workout and a whole bunch of biological systems fire that are really healthy. And so how do you get people to show up and do that every day?
I was going to say, I love that, because I'm really into movement, by the way, Julian. This is probably something that you haven't known about me, but I actually used to teach movement to personal trainers, osteopath, chiropractors. I actually wrote a whole massive module. It's crazy, right? We'll definitely be talking about that offline, 100%. So I'm definitely into that and that kind of stuff. But that's fascinating. What was the other thing you're working on?
So the other one is actually something called entrepreneurial archetypes. And what that is it's kind of like a Myers-Briggs for entrepreneurs, right? So we have this big gold rush coming into the entrepreneurial creator class, right? It's a new form of not only identification of who we are, but like building a career, right? Like you can now make a very sustainable living being a freelancer or being a content creator or being, a coach or a teacher or some form of entrepreneurship. But from the outside, we kind of lump all that together and we're like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. When in reality, there's many different types of entrepreneurs, right? So you have like Oprah on one side, who is very much a content creator and a teacher and a coach. And you have Elon Musk on the other, who is very much a systems thinker that brings together resources. If Elon Musk put himself in Oprah's shoes, he'd probably fail. And if Oprah put herself in Elon Musk's shoes, she'd probably fail, right? And so the entrepreneurial archetype is actually a psych-based quiz that allows you to go through it, answers a bunch of questions, and then based on how you respond to these questions that we've built, start to uncover what type of entrepreneur you are, what type of company that you want, what type of people you need to surround yourself to support you with, where your roadblocks are going to be, and then has a bunch of assets that allow you to, further strengthen what you're good at and support what inevitably you're not good at, right? And that was born out of this place of seeing people who were, very creative, artistic creators trying to put together systems to scale scale a fit company to have lots of employees. And I'm like, you're not like an employee building company entrepreneur. So find somebody that is. And they're like, well, how did you know that? And you're like, well, if you just look at what you want to spend all your time doing, it's creating stuff inside here and putting it out to the world, right? And so our hope with that is to help people go from the space of wanting to be an entrepreneur to facilitating a deeper self-understanding of who they are, and then building the right structure around them the first time, so that they don't end up, beat down, burnt out, exhausted, failing in entrepreneurship, and that they have the best chance of success. And that partially comes out of, I think, a place in my heart where entrepreneurship is bloody hard. It's mentally exhausting. And if you're, a fish trying to climb a tree in entrepreneurship, it makes it so much harder than if you're a monkey trying to climb a tree. So we want people to be in that space as quick as possible, to give them the best chance at success. Partially because I believe, if everyone starts to build an entrepreneurial mindset in some capacity, even if it's like a little side hustle, we'll start to create some really beautiful things that further supporting other humans. Yeah,
very good. Love it, love it, love it. Interesting, actually, because I suppose that could also facilitate. I'm a real big fan of self-awareness, right? Because if you're not self-aware of like your strengths and your weaknesses and what do you need to do to become successful, and it's interesting because you picked up a really good point earlier on. Not everyone is an entrepreneur, right? You could be an intrapreneur. You could just be like, it doesn't really matter. We still need to have the toilet scrubbers of today. We still need to have the people in the cinema booths serving popcorn. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, not everyone is an entrepreneur, and I think it's a really good talk. I think that could really help aid many different things. So that's great, man. I really appreciate that. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see. We launched basically last month, and we've had, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 or 9,000 people take the quiz already. And so it's just really powerful to see the level of self-awareness that immediately comes out of it, and follow up with these people. And just, some of the comments come back that are like, it's the first time somebody's explained to me why I resist building structure so much. Or it's the first time somebody's explained to me, why I struggle to put my message out there, right? And just giving people that tool on a level that is, not necessarily behind really large price tags or opaque, or like, for us, it's about giving those tools as transparently as possible and putting them out the world so that as many people can use it as possible. All the good stuff will come when you find alignment on the back end. And so it's been a really powerful kind of first month and a half here, and just excited to keep getting it out to people, scaling it, And then ultimately our big thing is building the entrepreneurial community behind it so that like-minded entrepreneurs can find each other, and entrepreneurs can find unlike-minded entrepreneurs that can support each other.
Love it. It's like a kind of a collaborative community, if you like. And you know, in fact, it's interesting. We were talking about collaborations earlier on in our private Next Level Club, which is our private members only club, about the importance of building collaborative synergies more than anything else to kind of make something which is kind of more impactful than it's just you. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting. We're kind of singing off the same hymn note. I like that. That's kind of cool, man.
Well, I take a lot of my inspiration from nature, right? Where if you look at a forest is inherently collaborative. It has to be. Right. An uncollaborative forest dies, right? And so when you look at the human experience, it has to be collaborative as it was born out of the same systems, right? And that's what I'm really fascinated in, especially at this time of like the internet and even some of the stuff that's happening in like decentralized finance and decentralized platforms. You know, what is the true potential of humans and entrepreneurship in a decentralized world? Right. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, very cool. Listen, I'm conscious of time, and we could be talking about we have some very interesting commonalities. So, but listen, I just want to say thank you very much for being on the show today. Guys, if you are listening to the recording of this, or even if you listen to us on YouTube, whatever, if you want to connect with Julian, make sure what's the best way that they can connect with you, Julian?
Yeah, the two easiest ways, just go to deschutes.co. Drop me a message on there. There's a contact page and a little chat thing there. Or if you're on Instagram, I'm pretty responsive on that. And that's just Deschutes. Nothing crazy, nothing hard to find. So do it on there. I love, having these conversations. Clearly I'm a little bit passionate about it. So just looking to connect with like-minded people that just want to keep creating and building and love this conversation, Adam. Love connecting with you. Love all the commonalities that have come up and just look forward to continue to build and create together.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it too. Listen, guys, please feel free to reach out to Julian as well. And I'm sure that if you want to take that scorecard, by the way, if you want to take that quiz, drop Julian a little message either on Instagram or on the Deschutes website. Just mention the show that you've listened to Julian on here, and I'm sure in due time you'll be able to be like, okay, you listened to that. Cool. So, listen, buddy, just want to say thanks very much for being on the show today, giving your epiphanies and your great content, man.
Oh, Adam, I love what you're doing at the Game Changer Show. Love just all the guests that you have. So I'm super honored to be, invited on, and look forward to watching so much more of them.
Appreciate it, man. Listen, guys, if you want to learn more, make sure that you have subscribed to the Game Changer Show here on YouTube, and make sure that you also, when you do subscribe, click on and activate that bell as always so that you'll get an activation. You won't miss out on those opportunities. So from me and Julian, we'll see you back here again on next Wednesday, 6 p.m. GMT, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And have a fantastic day when you leave that. Take care. See you soon.
Love you guys. See ya.
Hey, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Game Changers Experience. I hope that you got some amazing value, some great insights, and golden nuggets that you can implement into your business straight away. I would really, really appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review on the button below. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.